So, last week didn't go particularly well. I'll leave my predictions up on the screen now for you to see. There's a lot of red there. A lot more than I'd like. The Tigers are world class apparently, and the Rabbitohs, that wasn't me. I don't know who picked them, but that wasn't me. Kicking things off in round 4 in the NRL, we have the Roosters versus the Panthers. Taking a look at the team list of the Roosters first. In the backs, they have James Tedesco, Daniel Tupou, Joseph Sawali, Joey Manu, Dominic Young, Luke Keary, and Sam Walker. In the forwards, Jared Warrior-Hargreaves, Brandon Smith, Terrell May, Nat Butcher, Sitili Tupanua, and Victor Radley. And on the bench for the Roosters, Connor Watson, Naufahu White, Egan Butcher, and Angus Crichton. Taking a look at the team list of the Panthers now, in the backs they have Dylan Edwards, Sonia Taruva, Isaac Tango, Taylor May, Brian Toto, Jerome Luai, and Brad Schneider. In the forwards is Moses Liotta, Mitch Kenny, Lindsay Smith, Luke Garner, Liam Martin, and Isaiah Yeo. On the bench for the Panthers, Dane Laurie, Matt Eisenhuth, Liam Henry, and Mavrin Geyer. So, of course, the key individual missing from this game is Nathan Cleary. Who is he being replaced by? Brad Schneider. Some people won't have seen too much of Brad Schneider last season, especially at Hull Kingston Rovers in Super League. So just to quickly kind of recap how things went for him. Hull KR were a strong team early on in the season. They had Jordan Abdul and Mikey Lewis in the halves. Jordan Abdul picks up an injury, I believe, quite a long-term injury, and they start to falter a little bit midway through the season. Hull KR are a team that kind of mid-table at worst to like pushing top 4. Bear in mind, Super League's a 12-team competition. Brad Schneider comes in midway through, and Hull KR start competing again. That's where, they were stuck in the middle, missing Jordan Abdul. Schneider comes in and elevates their game. Pretty sure the first 2 rounds he plays, wins both of them by a drop goal. I think one was Challenge Cup and one was Super League. So he comes in and establishes himself as a game-winning 7, like right off the bat. And Hull KR started competing a lot more against the top teams in the league. They're a lot more reliable. They had a much better kicking game, and he just had a flair to him that just elevated Hull KR, because I know they get quite specific about that, sorry. But he's not Nathan Cleary, that's the thing. So the kicking game won't be as effective. The run game won't be as effective. In terms of just kind of the chemistry won't quite be the same. There's a few reasons why I'm leaning towards the Roosters, and that is one of them. Of course, Nathan Cleary missing. Now, I do give Brad Schneider credit for his performances last year, so it's not like he's been sat on the bench or stuck in the reserves for a year and a half. He's played some, decent high-level games and played well in that time. But I think the consistency in squad for the Roosters does help, of course. I berated them after their performance against the Manly Seagulls. I thought they were absolutely awful. I could have seen that as a potential outlier because teams aren't always that unreliable, but the fact that they came out and beat the Rabbitohs in the fashion that they did just confirms to me that I was in fact wrong about overdoing it, taking the Rabbitohs to win. We'll get onto that one in the next game, but the Roosters, probably on balance this season, will be strong. It's just that's one of their down weeks against the Seagulls. But then to come back, look so effective, so quick and clean in attack, and be that strong defensively. They were opened a little bit by the Rabbitohs, and they probably should have put a few more points on the board. But it's, scramble defense at the end of the day needs to be praised, because it still takes a lot of effort to concede so few points. So, given the fact that the Roosters, yes, they'll be missing... Who are they missing? Lindsay Collins, Sandon Smith from last week. Nathan Cleary and Scott Sorensen missing for the Panthers. I think, on balance, leans more towards the Roosters. And the performance from the Roosters last week indicates that they will be fine. So I'm just going to edge it to the Roosters only because of Nathan Cleary. So I'm going to go with the Roosters to win 1 to 12 points. Next up, we have the Rabbitohs versus the Bulldogs. Taking a look at the team list of the Rabbitohs. In the backs, they have Latrell Mitchell, Alex Johnston, Jack Whiten, Isaiah Tass, Tanya Milne, Cody Walker, and Dean Hawkins. In the forwards, Tavita Totola, Damien Cook, Tom Burgess, Keen Kalamatangi, Jacob Host, and Cameron Murray. And on the bench is Michael Chi Cam, Talis Duncan, Shakai Mitchell, and Davey Moale. Taking a look at the Bulldogs, in the backs they have Blake Taff, Blake Wilson, Jacob Kiraz, Stephen Crichton, Connor Tracy, Matt Burton and Drew Hutchison. In the forwards, Max King, Reid Marnie, Liam Knight, Viliami Kickout, Jacob Preston and Jamin Salmon. And on the bench for the Bulldogs is Kurt Mann, Samuel Hughes, Josh Curran and Curtis Morin. First of all, South Sydney. Oh, what was that? What was that? I don't have an answer for what that was. Maybe you do. Maybe you've got a slightly more harsh word than I have. But you just can't do that. Whereas the Bulldogs came in with a surprising performance last week. And fair play to them. The Bulldogs haven't been so far off. Like, they don't look like world beaters. I don't think they're particularly a top 8 team, but they don't look miles away from the middle of the pack. I don't think the Rabbitohs do either. Last week they certainly did, but they've had a few tough games and competed fairly well. But last week was abysmal. Now, the main thing that kind of sways it in favour of the Bulldogs to me, first of all, last week's performance is a 1. I don't always like going week to week, but that's, of course, one indication that I could lean towards the Bulldogs. 2, attitude. The attitude of Walker, I don't think is as bad as some people think it is, but it's not great. The attitude of Latrell Mitchell can be even worse. Like, at his worst, it's bad. At his best, it's world class. Like, when he's on form. But unfortunately, we get too much of the poor attitude, doesn't look like he's trying Latrell Mitchell. That's the kind of Mitchell that we see too much of for my liking. Because he can be a complete and utter game changer when he wants to be. But one thing I'm going to have to start getting used to with the Bulldogs is I would take Toby Sexton over Drew Hutchison normally. But if they plan to stick with Hutchison for the rest of the season, then fair enough, I'm okay with this. Because then at least for an entire season, as you know, the weeks go by, more training sessions, more game time, you develop as a spine, as a unit, and learn each other's kind of nuances about each other's game. So Drew Hutchison in there for another week is a positive for me. Also, Dean Hawkins didn't particularly show anything great. I was hoping he would at least be on par with what Lachlan Ilias has been providing, because I haven't really raved about him too much. In fact, I've been quite critical of Lachlan Ilias. And I don't think Latrell Mitchell and Cody Walker, given the style, the way that the Rabbitohs play, can't really carry it on their own. I think in terms of the forward battle, I would typically lean towards the Rabbitohs in the forwards against near enough anybody, because I think in the forward pack they are extremely strong and they might win it this week. But I think the Bulldogs have enough to compete in the middle. They may still lose that battle, but they have enough to compete. But I think the attitude that they've got, there's a much better feeling around the Bulldogs at the moment. They know from where they were last year and where they currently are that it's going to take time. There's, a process. They've got new players to kind of, mould into the squad. But there's a decent feeling around the Bulldogs. I think their attitude and performances last week will help them in this week. So I'm going to go with the Bulldogs to win 1 to 12 points. Next up, we have the Broncos versus the Cowboys. Taking a look at the team list of the Broncos. In the backs, they have Tristan Saylor, Jesse Arthurs, Katoni Staggs, Selwyn Cobbo, Dane Mariner, Ezra Mam, and Adam Reynolds. In the forwards, Corey Jensen, Billy Walters, Fletcher Baker, Jaden Hunt, Jordan Rickey, and Patrick Carrigan. And on the bench, Tyson Smoothie, Xavier Willison, Kobe Hetherington, and Corey Oates. Taking a look at the team list of the Cowboys now, in the backs they have Scott Drinkwater, Cal Felt, Valentine Holmes, Zach Labert, Murray Talangi, Tom Dearden, and Chad Townsend. In the forwards, Jordan McLean, Reece Robson, Jason Taumalolo, Kulakefu Finifeyuaki, Jeremiah Nanai, and Ruben Cotter. And on the bench is Jake Granville, Griffin Neem, Sam McIntyre, and Jack Gosowski? Not too sure yet. I'll learn it. So, in terms of consistency in squads, Cowboys are, as far as I'm aware, unchanged from last week, I think. Maybe 1 or 2 changes in there, I apologise. The Broncos without Reece Walsh, without Payne Haas, and also without Brendan Piacora is going to be a big miss. People won't be focusing on him too much, but he is a big miss. Maybe not the same level as Haas and Walsh, but still important. Adam Reynolds coming back in is huge, and I'd like to think that he can manipulate the game in such a way that it takes a lot of focus off Reece Walsh, but the amount of spice and the kind of penetration that Reece Walsh can provide, gaining those overlaps on the edges, is almost unparalleled in the NRL. And I don't think Tristan Sailor's going to be the guy to replicate that, unfortunately. They still have individuals that can create moments from nothing. Katoni, Staggs, Sewell and Cobbo, they can create things out of thin air. But just the way that the Broncos have been playing defensively, like last week, you can excuse the attack maybe not firing on all cylinders with Jock Madden instead of Adam Reynolds and losing Reece Walsh when they did. But to just be that defensively poor, you just don't really have an excuse for it, to be honest. So, yeah, as much as control the game might have gone towards the Panthers, I still kind of trust Jock Madden to at least set a half-decent kicking game. But just defensively, the Broncos were poor. Simple as that. The Cowboys, they haven't been perfect. Like, in attack, they look really free-flowing, extremely effective, really quick and aggressive. But defensively, and in some moments of execution in their attack, haven't been perfect. So maybe the Broncos can chip away at them. Maybe Adam Reynolds can kind of, set a real positive tone for the Broncos, keep them pinned back for a lot of the game, make the forwards have to do a lot of work. But I just think the individuals, Scott Drinkwater, Tom Dearden again, are just too classy, too good. Will create holes in this Broncos team because defensively, as I've mentioned, they are pretty poor this year. But in the forwards, should lean heavily towards the Cowboys. And I can imagine a very high-scoring game on the side of the Cowboys, but I think the Broncos still have a lot of great individuals in there that can slow down the progress from time to time, but I think, for me, it's just overwhelming towards the Cowboys at the moment. But as I've said, they're not perfect, but based off the teams and what I've seen so far this year, the Cowboys just feel like a safe option to me. So I'm going to go with the Cowboys to win, 13+. Next up, we have the Dragons versus Seagulls. Taking a look at the team list of the Dragons, in the backs they have Tyrell Sloan, Zach Lomax, Mosesi Suli, Jack Bird, Michaeli Ravalawa, Cal Flanagan and Ben Hunt. In the forwards, Francis Molo, Jacob Liddle, Blake Laurie, Luciano Leilua, Jaden Stewart and Tom Eisenhuth. And on the bench, Jesse Marshke. Is it Marshke? Marshke? I'll get it right one of these days. Jack DeBellin, Hame Sele, and Raymond Faitella Mariner. Taking a look at the team list of the Seagulls now, in the backs, Tom Trebojevic, Raymond Taumalo Vega, Tolu Kula, Ruben Garrick, Jackson Parlow, Luke Brooks, and Dali Cherry Evans. In the forwards, Taniela Paseka, Lachlan Croker, Josh Aloye, Hamol Olakwatu, and Ben and Jake Trebojevic. And on the bench is Carl Lawton, Corey Waddell, Ethan Bullymore, and Nathan Brown. Looking at the two teams on paper, it leans heavily towards the Manly Seagulls, simple as that. I think it was unfortunate to lose last week against the Eels, but keep in mind, first of all, they had a 14-0 lead. So to be a strong enough team to take a commanding lead like that is a real positive. To then lose it is a negative as well. Keep that in mind. But at least to say that they competed against the Eels, which I think has been a fairly strong team this season, is a positive sign. They competed against the Rabbitohs fairly well. And they offered up a tough challenge. Competed against the Roosters, who we thought were going to be a lot more competitive. In that game, they weren't particularly great, but the Seagulls, they control that game. And then against the Eels, were still extremely competitive. So, for me, given the ups and downs of the Dragons, they've hit some pretty decent highs, especially in round one, but their lows are poor. But the Dragons have been up and down and could offer a few problems for the Seagulls a few times in this game. I think they can. And they've definitely shown it. Cal Flanagan has had his moments, which is good to see for him. Ben Hunt, his usual self. Tyrell Sloan getting more involved, which is good to see. So, the Dragons will offer up some issues here and there, I think. But the Seagulls have just been too competitive, really strong in attack and defence, and will just improve week to week. And Luke Brooks will get more and more involved. They'll just learn more as a team. And with players like Tom Trebojevic in there and Dali Cherry Evans, it's hard to kind of go against that unless it's like a top 4 team, like a usual top 4 team. In the forwards, Taniela Paseka has been brilliant. I think Blake Lawrie is a really effective forward as well. But yeah, I just like the quality, the power and the pace, especially with Olakau'atu in there as well. The reliability of Jake Trbojevic is a huge help. So in the forwards and the backs, leaning heavily towards the Seagulls for me. And yeah, just hopefully an opportunity for the Seagulls to really stretch themselves and to go at the Dragons, create opportunities early in the tackle count in their own half. So yeah, I think it could be a dangerous one for the Dragons, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they will at least offer a challenge, but still think it's going to lean heavily towards the Seagulls. So without waffling on anymore, I'm going to go with the Seagulls to win, 13+. Next up, we have the Titans versus the Dolphins, starting with the Titans team list. In the backs, they have Jaden Campbell, Alifiana Khan-Pereira, Brian Kelly, AJ Brimson, Philip Sammy, Kieran Foran, and Tanner Boyd. In the forwards, we have Moeki Fotuaika, Chris Randall, Keenan Palacia, Cleese Haas, Beau Fermor, and Jamin Jolliffe. And on the bench is Sam Verrills, Isaac Liu, Erin Clark, and Joe Stimson. Taking a look at the team list of the Dolphins now, in the backs, they have Hamiso Tabai-Fidel, Jermaine Asako, Jake Cavarillo, Herbie Farnworth, Jack Bostock, Cody Nikarima, and Isaiah Katoa. In the forwards, Jesse Bromwich, Jeremy Marshall-King, Thomas Flegler, Felice Kafusi, Ewan Aitken, and Max Plath. And on the bench is Josh Kurt, Kurt Donahue, Mark Nichols, and Ray Stone. I always talk about teams on paper, and I like both of these teams on paper. I really do. But in terms of the difference between on paper, like in theory and practically, the Dolphins have actually done it, whereas the Titans have had it done to them, unfortunately. Now, with the inclusion of Jaden Campbell this week, it could spark a bit of a change, but losing somebody like Farsum Malawi through the middle is going to be a huge miss. So it's real unfortunate for them. But I just don't really see too much coming from the Titans. I think they'll put up points. Jaden Campbell will help facilitate that. I do think players like AJ Brimson are kind of wasted at centre. A bit like Jack Whiten at the Rabbitohs. Like, I'd just play him at 7, to be honest. Just play him at 7. He's kind of wasted there. It's not Origin. You don't need to just chuck a number 7 in the centres like he's Nico Hines or something. Just play him where he's most effective, which I think is in the halves. If you need to drop Foran or Boyd, so be it. But compared to this Dolphins team, Tabai-Fidel, Averillo, Farnworth, and Marshall-King for me are like the most important players. Creating from nothing, really setting a tone. I just think this Dolphins team could be something great. If they start to find a more consistent rhythm, because that round 1 performance wasn't great. But if they continue to find a rhythm, they could punish a lot of teams and a lot of top teams as well and really cement themselves as a top 8 squad. So I'd like to think that with the players that the Titans have got, they could compete. But as I said, theory and practically, they're just two different teams, really. So I'm going to go with the Dolphins to win, 13+. Next up, we have the Warriors versus the Knights, starting with the team list of the Warriors. In the backs, they have Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, Dallin Watene-Zelezniak, Rocco Berry, Adam Pompey, Marcelo Montoya, Luke Metcalf, and Sean Johnson. In the forwards, they have Adam Fanua-Blake, Wade Egan, Mitchell Barnett, Jackson Ford, Kurt Capewell, and Toru Harris. And on the bench is Freddie Lussick, Marata Niokora, Bunty Afoa, and Dylan Walker. Taking a look at the team list now of the Knights. In the backs, they have Kalen Ponga, Thomas Jenkins, Dane Gagai, Bradman Best, Enari Taula, Tyson Gamble, and Jack Cogger. In the forwards is Jacob Saifiti, Phoenix Crosland, Daniel Saifiti, Tyson Frizzell, Kai Piss-Paul, and Adam Elliott. And on the bench for the Knights is Jaden Brayley, Matt Croker, Jack Hetherington, and Brodie Jones. The Warriors have been put under a lot of stress so far this season with the opponents that they've played against. They've played 3 really, really tough opponents to open the season. And they've dealt with them well. You know, they could have had 2 wins in the season by now. Probably 3 because they had the lead against the Sharks. But pending a few bits of momentum going the other way, the Warriors could easily be 3-0 to the start of the season. Easily be 3-0. So I've been really impressed with the Warriors so far. They've continued with that really aggressive, really quick attacking style that they had last year. It's just really attractive stuff. They can play in, in the short spaces. They can spread the ball out wide. They can punish you through the middle. Whereas looking at the Knights this year, they have also been tested themselves, but just haven't been quite as clean for me. And maybe should have, even though I predicted Storm to win last week, probably could have been and should have been in the driver's seat a lot more in that game and really set the tone. Now, I know, what's his name now? Jackson Hastings was dropped. I don't think it needed to happen. And I think there will be some games where they miss him. You don't know what you've got till it's gone. Now, Jack Cogger, I should say, not Croker, Jack Cogger is a real solid addition to this team. But I think there's just something underlying with the Knights right now. They're just not quite clicking. Whereas with the Warriors, they've clicked every single week. It's just been some slight things have affected the results. So I think the Warriors will be in a real strong position this week. I'm not going to completely write off the Knights because I think they've been okay and they've competed well at times. And the Warriors themselves haven't been perfect, so I'm not going to assume a 13+, even though I think at their best, the Warriors have the potential to win this 13+, especially if the Knights aren't on it. But on balance, over the course of the season, the Warriors have just been a real solid team. And there's still a few question marks for the Knights for me right now. So with that being said, I'm going to go with the Warriors to win, 1 to 12 points. Next up, we have the Sharks versus the Raiders. Taking a look at the team list of the Sharks. In the backs, they have William Kennedy, Sione Katoa, Jesse Ramian, Kale Ido, Ronaldo Mulatalo, Braden Trindle, and Nico Hines. Onto the forwards, they have Thomas Hazelton, Blake Brayley, Oregon Kafusi, CSC Vitalakai, Teague Wilton, and Cameron McInnes. And on the bench is Daniel Atkinson, Jack Williams, Billy Burns, and another one to bear with me on, Tuku Heutapua. I'll get there. I promise you I'll get there. In the backs of the Raiders now, they have Jordan Rapiner, James Schiller, Matthew Timoko, Sebastian Chris, Xavier Savage, Ethan Strange, and Jamal Fogarty. In the forwards, they have Josh Papali'i, Danny Levy, Joseph Tarpany, Hudson Young, Elliot Whitehead, and Morgan Smithies. And in the forwards, Tom Starling, Atta Moriata, Zach Hosking, and Pasami Saulo. What happened to the Sharks last week? What happened to the Sharks? Now, for the Raiders to lose against the Warriors, there's at least some reasoning to it because it's the Warriors and they've been great this season. But the Sharks to just to offer so little against that Tigers team is unbelievable. Completely unbelievable. And I was, it would make sense if there was like a bunch of sin bins or a red card in there somewhere, but to just be completely dominated like that is so unexpected. So it does take a bit of trust out of the Sharks for me. And I do still have trust in the Raiders. I haven't lost any trust in them. And so, to lose to the Warriors is not the end of the world. If the Sharks lost to the Warriors, it wouldn't be the end of the world because I predicted the Warriors to beat them in round 1. So I am kind of leaning towards the Raiders for a few reasons. Number one is Kale Ido is in the centres. Talakai's moved out or moved inwards to second row. It's not a huge change, but it could just kind of change the matchups on the edges. And Talakai at centre is an absolute beast. So if you just bring him in one and you pair him up against other big guys, it kind of takes away his edge, basically. Kale Ido, I think, is a decent player. When he played for Cook Islands at the World Cup, I think he was an exciting player. But I just don't fully know what he's going to be able to offer individually. Now, maybe he links up well when they spread the ball, but individually, I don't think he's going to be the same. Timoko and Chris, I think, could have a real field day in the centres. Jesse Ramian's, of course, a reliable centre, but Timoko can create a lot of opportunities from nothing. He's a fast, powerful centre. He doesn't look like it based on his size, but when he runs with the ball, he is fast and powerful. Powerful, I mean, not fast. He does look fast, of course, but in the forwards, Papali'i and Tarpany, Morgan Smithies, Whitehead, Young, just real powerful players and can dominate the middle of the pack here. So I think the Sharks might lose out through the middle. The Raiders do know how to make great field position. We've seen it a few times this season. And they do know how to swing momentum into their favour. But Jamal Fogarty, I think, will set a real good tone with his kicking game. And Ethan Strange, I think, will continue to develop week in, week out. And be a real positive force in this Raiders team. So I don't think it's going to be... I'm not 100% confident in the Raiders. Part of me still kind of wants to go with the Sharks because I felt that they've been the better team this season. It's just last week has put me off a little bit. You know, if it was anyone in the middle of the pack, then maybe I'd still lean towards the Sharks. But the fact it was the Tigers, and on paper the Tigers aren't particularly strong, I don't know. I'm not confident at all about this one, but I'm going to go with the Raiders to win 1 to 12 points. Finally, for this week, we have the Eels versus the Tigers. Taking a look at the team list of the Eels. In the backs, they have Clint Gutherson, Micah Sevo, Will Penasini, Morgan Harper, Sean Russell, Blaze Talangi, and Dylan Brown. In the forwards, Regan Campbell-Gillard, Joey Lussick, Junior Barlow, Sean Lane, Bryce Cartwright, and Jermaine Hopgood. And on the bench is Luca Moretti, Ryan Matterson, Joe Offengawi, and Kelmy Talangi. Moving on to the team list of the Tigers now. In the back, they have Jurien Bula, Charlie Staines, Solomona Fatape, Justin Olam, Junior Tupou, Lachlan Galvin, and Aiden Caesar. In the forwards, Stefano Otokamanu, Api Coruscant, David Clemmer, Isaiah Papali'i, John Bateman, and Fanua Pole. And on the bench is Jaden Sullivan, Alex Seyfarth, Asu Kepoa, and Samuela Fainu. Now, the Tigers, last week, what a hell of an effort. That came from nowhere for me. Absolutely nowhere. Now, wins can happen. Underdogs can win. Normally, sometimes they might be helped out by the referee, or they just rely a lot on the kicking game, so it's just a lot of aerial wins, and then maybe mistakes by the favourite as well. That can happen, but it just didn't go that way. The Tigers, for me, they earned that. They fully earned it and get complete credit for that. I still don't fully trust them yet. And I don't think even Tigers fans will fully trust them yet. The one thing that helps them is, first of all, they are able to, we see now that they are capable of performances like that. That's the first thing. They're capable of it. 2, the Eels are without Mitchell Moses, who is a huge miss. So, Lachlan Galvin as well, week to week is going to improve. As a very young player, very inexperienced, is going to improve week to week and had a good performance against the Sharks. Jurien Bula, also young, a bit more experienced than Galvin, is also going to improve hopefully as well. He's also had international experience, so I'm starting to look at him to offer more week in, week out. Become one of those elite fullbacks. Still time for him to do that, so doesn't need to do it yet. But maybe Aiden Caesar in there is the way to go. Is a lot more reliable, better kicking game. I mean, it makes sense based on experience against Jaden Sullivan. They do need someone in there that's going to set the tone and is going to keep the structure within the team. Aiden Caesar, I think, offers that more than Jaden Sullivan. But Lachlan Galvin is something different to Sullivan in terms of the running game, and potentially is more effective as well. So, Justin Olam as well is a huge inclusion. Seeing him in there now is going to be so helpful for their team going forwards. He is such a powerful player, really effective. He's on that list of players that can create from nothing, especially in the centre position. Having centres that can create from absolutely nothing are a godsend. And Justin Olam is one of the best in that. So I think the fact that the Eels are missing Moses, they haven't been perfect themselves. Great comeback against the Seagulls, but I think they can still create, but they're not a perfect team. They do have their holes. And the West Tigers, I think, will just have a lot of confidence coming into this game, and the Eels will be a little bit shot after losing Mitchell Moses. So I'm going to take a gamble here. I'm going to take a real gamble on this one. I can't believe I'm about to do this. But I'm going to take the Tigers to win 1 to 12 points. So to recap my predictions for this week, I'm going to take the Roosters and Bulldogs to win by 1 to 12 points, the Cowboys, Seagulls and Dolphins all to win 13+, and then the Warriors, Raiders and Tigers all to win 1 to 12 points. In terms of winners' confidence, Jesus Christ, I'm at about 65%. It's pretty low because there's a few games here that can swing the other way. The Panthers could beat the Roosters, The Bulldogs could blow it against the Rabbitohs. I could absolutely see that happening. What else? The Knights could pose a challenge to the Warriors, so there's a bit of a question mark in there, but I'm still quite confident about the Warriors. The Sharks and the Raiders could really go either way. It really could. And the Eels could... They could batter the Tigers. Like, that could easily happen. Confidence is not particularly high. In terms of margin confidence, usually I'm quite high with this. I'm at about 85%. There's a few that I'm not too sure about. The Titans could maybe challenge the Dolphins this week, or at least keep it somewhat competitive. I don't know. It's going to be a real tough week, but I thought I knew how things were going to go last week, and I got 3 out of 8. So I'm not going to pretend to know that it's going to be a struggle. I'm going to assume that, oh, I've got this one in the bag for 8 out of 8. Because this season has been mental. So that's going to be it for this video. If you have any predictions, do let me know in the comments down below. Also, let me know how you got on last week as well. If you enjoy this video, feel free to leave a like. It really does help to get the video out there more, with the more likes it gets. If you want to stay up to date with more Rugby League content, subscribe to the channel as well. But that's going to be it. Hopefully, we get a much better week. If you want to see any betting tips, you can check my TikTok link in the description as well. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.